Why is there such a war on kindness and compassion in this country? How can we raise our kids and our future generations to be better people and better human beings? Is Christianity and religion really the answer to making us all just better people in general? Let's talk about it. Hey folks, my name is Javier Lopez here. It's Javier Blog 208 coming to you live. Some deep thoughts tonight. Been meaning to do a video about this, about like the war on kindness and compassion in this country. I feel like constantly people in general, and this is just a problem with people, human beings in general, they're always looking for someone to hate. They're always looking for someone to hate. And if it's not one group of people, it's another group of people. If it's not another group of people, it's another group of people. And sadly, the reality of the matter is this is way more prevalent on the right than it is on the left. The idea, the desire to, hate a group of people is common because at the end of the day, for some reason, human mentality always wants to feel superior to another group and marginalize a group of people that doesn't quite fit their standards, if you will. So the reality of the matter is that, we're thinking about, for example, they tried to marginalize, women and black people way back in the day. Then they tried to marginalize gay people. Now they're trying to marginalize trans people. And the way they're going to do it is they're always going to make anybody that's not different than them just demonize them, if you will. Demonize them so they can feel superior and feel like they have the higher moral standard. And the worst part of it all is when they pass the buck to God to do it. Like they say, God hates these people, so do we. God doesn't approve of so-and-so lifestyles or so-and-so identities, so do we. And we don't because God does, and they pass the buck to God. So in a sense, they're playing God and saying, oh, look, because of him, we are like this. And at the end of the day, it brings back a very powerful moral question that I've always asked and wondered and just speculated in my head. Can our morality be better than the morality that we suppose comes from the Bible, if you will, in some ways? For example, why do we have to? It's okay to question things. We shouldn't be afraid to ask questions. Why do we have to be against trans people? Why do we have to be against gay people? Why are Christians told that they have to be against, so-and-so groups of people who are different than them? Why do we have to hate on undocumented immigrants who are just living in this country trying to find a better life? Why can't we just learn to love people, considering that the biggest thing that Christ taught us in the scriptures was to love people, to love people. And that's not to say to approve of alcoholism or sins that will destroy your life or things like that, or doing drugs. That's not to say to approve of that, because it's clear that people like that do need help. And I'm not saying that to hate on them. I'm saying that the reality is that these are life-destroying things, like alcoholism, doing drugs, things like that. Whereas, at the end of the day, if you're going after people who are just different than you, if they're gay or trans, just living their lives, why are you teaching people to hate in the name of fake Christian love, if you will? So I was watching something that actually came from the late Charlie Kirk, and it was a rather disturbing thing that I watched. I'm going to play a very quick clip for you from the late Charlie Kirk, and we're going to discuss it. And it's going to kind of go into the broader discussion on why there is a big war on compassion in this country. And this is Charlie Kirk kind of, if you will, this is going to be of Charlie Kirk kind of attacking.
Send them to a good school. Have a low crime neighborhood. Not to have my kid be taught the lesbian, gay, transgender garbage in their school.
So here Charlie Kirk refers to, I guess, teaching kids the so-called lesbian, gay, transgender garbage in their school. Now, what is this lesbian, gay, transgender garbage? It's teaching their kids to accept people who are different than them. And it goes back to my whole point. The whole point of a war on compassion in this country. It's like they want their kids to grow up to be hateful and to hold, backwards, conservative, bigoted views that they used to hold in their past. Views that should be abandoned. Like I continue to say, we need to move past as a society. As a society, homophobia and racism, transphobia too, misogyny. There's so many things that as a society we need to move past. And when Charlie Kirk and many, 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 many others, he's far from alone, is referring to, teaching kids to, learn to accept their peers who are different than them, their peers who might be gay, their peers who might be trans or whatever, learning to accept them and love them as they are, as teaching that as lesbian, gay, transgender garbage. It shows that we're facing a real problem in this country, a problem where we want to pass our hate to the younger generation. And that is a problem, a very sad problem, that it breaks my heart to say that Gen Z kind of grew up in. Gen Z grew up in the height of the Trump era. They came to age in the height of the Trump era, when they were like, that's when they came to be able to vote and stuff. So this is what they were exposed to. They were exposed to, as of coming of age, Trump defeating Hillary Clinton. They were exposed to, as of coming of age, yes, Biden winning, but at the same time, COVID, for example, COVID kind of like locking them all down in their houses and giving Republicans a very good name. Like, because Republicans were the freedom fighters and the people that were like against the mandates and all that stuff. And they were correct on that for the most part. For the most part, they were correct on that. And then they were continuing to be exposed to, like, even like, for example, like the second Trump administration when Trump defeated Kamala Harris. So I've been spending a lot of time seeking answers as to why many in Gen Z have moved so far right wing, and I think and this is something I'm going to do another video on probably a little bit later, but I've been trying to continue to seek answers to why Gen Z has moved so far right wing, why many in Gen Z has moved so far right wing. I don't think it's over. I don't think all hope is lost, but I do see that this has been a very growing trend. And the reality of the matter is, and I'm just going to touch on this very briefly, is this because this is the era that they were exposed to. They were exposed to Trump defeating Hillary. They were exposed to COVID and the lockdowns and the mandates. They were exposed to Trump defeating Kamala Harris. They were exposed to coming of age when the worst of the right-wing madness was being, pushed on them in this country, if you will. Whereas millennials, the generation before that, of which I barely am a part of, and I'm talking very, very barely, like mere months. Millennials, the generation that were before that, many of them came of age when, say, Obama was becoming the president in 2008. Obama became reelected in 2012. And that's why millennials were all in favor of the first black president in 2008, his re-election in 2012, because many of them came of age during this time. Gen Z wasn't able to vote yet. And then that's why most millennials were all in for Hillary Clinton, whereas at the same time, by the way, I did not vote for Hillary Clinton. My political views were very different at the time. I was not one to vote for Hillary Clinton. I voted against her. That was the one time I voted against the Democrat in the last 3 elections. And by the way, that was my first presidential election, by the way. But continuing on, it's like we came to a point where it's just like the far right has really taken over the media space, taken over, just the social media space, podcasters, the pushing, the agendas, everything, whether it's on immigration, whether it's demonizing trans people, whether it's demonizing gay people, demonizing LGBT, demonizing compassion, demonizing anything they consider to be woke, and, demonizing policies of the more progressive Democrats, if you will, on the more progressive side, and more demonizing progressive policies altogether is like, bringing them to the idea that this is like socialism or communism or leftism and how evil the leftists are and all that. When in reality, as I explained in one of my last videos, that, for example, the immigration policy that most Democrats hold is practically the same as the immigration policy that Ronald Reagan held, or that both Bushes held. Considering that Ronald Reagan gave amnesty to millions, almost 3 million undocumented immigrants, as I have talked about in my previous one of my previous videos. Whereas, like, both Ronald Reagan and both Bushes, they wanted comprehensive immigration reform. They wanted to make the pathway to becoming citizens in this country, better and easier for immigrants, and it was just a less, right-wing Republican Party back then. Yeah, a lot of them were still, against things like gay marriage and all that, where that has changed. Unfortunately, it is moving back in the direction of being against it again, which is another thing to talk about. But the problem is that when we have normalized the far right in this country, we have normalized just a full-scale war on and rejection of compassion. When we have normalized demonizing the left in the worst of ways, we have normalized a full-scale rejection and compassion in this country. When we normalize, calling people illegal aliens, or saying that Democrats are open borders, or saying that LGBT is pushing woke on your kids, none of which is true. And I've already done a video exposing all of that. I'd have to link that below. But we are normalizing just a whole-scale war on kindness and compassion in this country. And this is what Gen Z in particular, and the next generation too, apparently, is getting exposed to on a regular basis. One of the primary reasons that I voted for Kamala Harris in this election, because I knew the stakes, I knew that the next generation was at stake, and I wanted to turn this around. And that was the primary reason, that was actually the main reason that I voted for Kamala Harris, because I wanted to see a kinder administration, not a monstrous, hateful one, And at the end of the day, what we're at right now is just, we are at a point where it's just like so many people in this country have like turned against, say, the LGBT community, have turned against their undocumented neighbors and immigrants and all that, have turned against, anything that's just like, talking about empathy, where we see people like Musk or Kirk, the late Kirk, demonizing the concept of empathy, where like you're saying that there's such thing as toxic empathy and all that. And I've already expressed that there is no such thing as toxic empathy. The reality of empathy is feeling with your fellow man, feeling with your gay brother, feeling with your lesbian sister, feeling with your transgender neighbor, feeling with your undocumented neighbor, feeling with your black neighbor, recognizing that these people are just exactly like you. And they're going through, they're marginalized communities, and they're going through hardness, different things in their lives that we probably aren't going to recognize. Give me a second. That's basically what it is. That's basically, at the end of the day, what woke is. It's basically feeling with your fellow man, empathy. Recognizing that you are not in the shoes of your black neighbor or gay neighbor or lesbian neighbor or trans neighbor or undocumented neighbor or refugee neighbor, Haitian neighbor, etc., 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 Muslim neighbor, Jewish neighbor. You are not in their shoes, so you don't know what these or Latino neighbor, sometimes, even though I'm part of that Latino community, but I don't quite, you know what I mean. I'm very Americanized. But the point is, you're not in their shoes, so you will never know what they're going through in their lives at the end of the day. And that's the whole point. And I saw something about, recently, I didn't really want to pull up this video because it was a hard video to pull up, where somebody who was on the right on YouTube was talking about, how it is such a horrible thing why do we want our kids to be rallying around marginalized communities and supporting marginalized communities? And at the end of the day, it just goes to show how far off the rails the right has gotten. We should want our kids, our grandkids, our next generation, this generation, to be rallying behind marginalized communities, to put the hateful ways of the past in the past. We should want our kids to be rallying behind, our black neighbor or our gay neighbor or our trans neighbor or our, Latino neighbor, undocumented neighbor, whatever. We should want our kids to be rallying behind them and supporting them. At the end of the day, the younger generation is our hope for the future. The younger generation is our only hope for the future at the end of the day. And if we're raising a kinder, more generous, kinder, more empathetic younger generation, then there would be a lot more hope for our future and result to just us being better human beings in the future. And the sad part about this is the example that this administration is setting, the example that people like Charlie Kirk set, the example that people like Tucker Carlson are setting, or these right-wing podcasters are setting, is an example that's turning people away from kindness, away from compassion, away from empathy, away from just being better people. And the saddest part about this, and we have to get to this part, is that they're doing it in the name of Christianity. And honestly, they are perverting, in my opinion, they're perverting the name of Christ. They are perverting the name of Christ when they're using Christianity to promote hate, and it comes down to a more fundamental problem. The reality of the matter is that and it was something that Billy Graham warned about too, by the way, is that the mixing of the hard right and Christianity is something that has been very, very dangerous for the morality and souls of the people of our country. The hard right and Christianity do not blend. They do not blend. You can argue about the left. I think that they blend a little better. I don't think they're perfect either. But at the end of the day, hard right and Christianity do not blend. They are not the same. You can't mix one and the other and say that because I'm a Christian, I'm going to support anti-LGBT laws. I'm going to support removing discrimination protections against gay people. I'm going to support mass deportations. I'm going to support preaching against Black Lives Matter. I'm going to support being against health care for people, who are taking away support, what I'm saying, taking away health care for people. I'm going to support, demonizing Latino people or immigrants or whatever, Somalians or Muslims or anything. You can't do that. You can't do that. The first thing that we need to teach our kids is kindness, is rallying around the marginalized. It's empathy. It's compassion. That's the first thing we need to teach our kids, because at the end of the day, that correlates with Christianity and the teachings of Christ more than anything. And this is one of the reasons why I really admire John Pelvots, for example. He may not be a Christian that's out there daily preaching sin, preaching the gospel and all that. And I think we do need to preach the gospel. The gospel is the most important thing. The gospel is what saves. Because I am of the Christian faith. I believe that, that compassion is the most important value, but I am of the Christian faith, and I still believe that the gospel is the way, the truth, that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, and the only one that died for our sins. I do believe that. And it's not something I just believe in, it's something I'm always going to stand for. But we can't use, brothers and sisters, we can't use Christianity to promote hate and bigotry and to be against empathy and compassion and against the marginalized communities, against social justice. We can't use Christianity to do that. We can't. We can't use Christianity to embolden the next generation to be as hateful as the last, or to be more hateful than the last. We can't be raising people like Nick Fuentes, for example. We can't be letting people like Tucker Carlson speak to our youth and drop the F word while claiming to be a Christian, and unapologetically dropping the FAGGOT word and claiming to be a Christian. We can't be supporting. We need to shun these people. Nick Fuentes, shun him. Tucker Carlson, shun him. They have no place in the body of, they have no place in Christianity. I pray they will repent one day. These hard right influencers, a lot of them, just shun them. They have no place in Christianity. And even though, going back to John Pelvots, even though at the end of the day he doesn't, quite preach the gospel, and he should, he does preach the truth about what is really going on, just in general. And I want to go through another live of just kind of reading through some of his articles, or just getting some of his articles. And at the end of the day, what's at the bottom of the thing of John Pelvots is he just wants us to be better people, better human beings. He wants compassion and empathy and kindness to be prioritized. Because compassion, empathy, and kindness are the first keys to Christianity. And that's my Christianity. This hard right, fundamentalism, dropping the F-bomb, hating immigrants, hating LGBT people, that's not the Christianity I belong to. That's not the Christianity I want anything to do with. And we need to just talk about it. Like, for example, John Palpatine wrote an article, conservative white Christians worship anybody but Jesus. And that's kind of true. The war on Christmas is finally here, and conservative Christians are waging it. That's also true, you know. And it's just we just have to we can't continue this war on compassion. We have to speak for ourselves and take for ourselves and say, hey, we're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to be homophobic anymore. We're not going to be transphobic anymore. We're not going to be racist anymore. We're not going to be misogynistic anymore. We're not going to be anti-woman anymore. We're going to put all that in the past. We're going to move on from all that and put it all in the past. We want this to be part of the past. And we want to raise a better next generation. We want to heal Gen Z from the right-wing toxicity that they've been exposed to for so long, since they came of age to vote. We want our young men to be kinder people in this society, better people in this society, young men who will reject misogyny, reject racism, reject homophobia, who will love their gay friends and neighbors, who will love their trans friends and neighbors, who will love their immigrant friends and neighbors. We want to be a better generation of people, a generation of young people, a better generation of young men. And that's what I'm speaking out. We want to reject Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson should not be speaking to the masses. We want to reject Andrew Tate. We want to reject many, many others, Joe Rogan and other, influencers and all that. We just want to be better. We want the next generation to be better. That's why I voted for Kamala Harris. And we should all make a point to keep speaking up against this war on compassion and kindness in this nation. And I think John Palpatine is an outstanding example of it. I'm going to do another live on him later, but I think this should sum it up. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.